G'day guys, welcome to our second episode of Covid Convos. I'm here with the team and today we're a full team. So we've got Kesh and we've got Simon. So I'm going to hand it over to Simon and he's going to introduce himself for the first time on the show. Welcome, mate.
Thanks, Grigsy. How are you guys? Thanks for having me along tonight. Sorry I missed the one yesterday, but off to a cracking start and looking forward to some more good episodes. I thought I'd just chip in with sort of my background, I suppose, following on what you guys did in the first episode. Got to know both these great guys through the MAP program at the University of Melbourne. I came to it from a background in the environmental area. That was my sort of previous studies and careers, but was looking for something different, another way of approaching that or approaching things in general. I've been interested in people and psychology and the way people think for a while, and then when I found positive psychology and how it used things like positive emotion to draw people towards a positive future rather than trying to scare people from bad scenarios, I thought that provided a great new way of looking at things and maybe a way of approaching the environmental field. So got involved and then got just sort of subsumed in all the different aspects of it and really enjoyed it. And
here we are. Awesome, great to have you along, mate. And how are you traveling with the situation? Because I know you're in a different sort of location to Kesh, even though you're both in the same state. So how are you finding it?
Yeah, so I'm in more of a regional area than Kesh, being in the capital city. It's interesting here. You can sort of get out and about. I just had my kids down at the skate park, and it was just like any other Sunday afternoon, I suppose, at the skate park. But early this morning, I was down at the supermarket, and wow, that was a different experience. Different experience to the skate park, a different experience to my typical Sunday shopping trip at the supermarket. It was very busy and people grabbing what they thought were the essentials they needed, I suppose. And toilet paper, pasta. I actually heard one guy talking to one of the assistants there who was laughing and saying, I'd never thought I'd see the day where rolled oats were sold out at the supermarket. You couldn't find any at all.
The staples, the really, really important stuff.
Yeah. But interestingly, I found myself sort of getting caught up with the wanting to buy and wanting to hoard sort of mentality a little bit. And I had to stop and sort of check myself a couple of times. And I probably did buy a couple of extra things that I didn't go there for, but it was really easy in that sort of crowd environment to get caught up in the whole sort of vibe and energy. Yeah,
you go and see people with full trolleys, and you start thinking, well, what do I need? Yeah,
I had a really weird experience with that. So, like, my household is a bit weird. Kate and I work a lot. So, we don't really want to spend time on domestic duties. Going to the shops is a bit of a chore for us. So we try to minimize it. So we've always shopped like month to month. We always buy for the month. So, but going through that experience with everybody else where they didn't do that, I wonder what people thought of us.
Yeah, I remember those days when shopping used to be a chore. And now with the kids, it's like a little escape.
A little time away.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah.
You should say that. You shouldn't say that when it's getting recorded, Grigsy.
No, that's a big mistake, isn't it? But like I was saying, I'm sure there'll be plenty of oversharing in these conversations. I was going to say on the toilet paper thing, I was thinking about it yesterday, and my son actually, I walked in yesterday because we haven't got much, we haven't got a lot of toilet paper here, and we had the same situation with it selling out. And my son's only 18 months old, and I found him in the toilet, at one point, and of course he's playing with the toilet roll and had put half a toilet roll down the toilet. And I thought, my gosh, normally I wouldn't care that much, but mate.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you realize how much people are fighting over this stuff right now? So
I think, you know, going back to our purpose with this whole, you know, thing that we're trying to do, isn't this the very first opportunity to ask that question? Like, well, how could you apply any kind of tool or process to make this, you know, process of shopping less stressful, you know, less anxiety inducing? Do it properly, like, you know, don't get caught up in the hype and the mess. And yeah, more than that, like, everyone can just wash their butts, man. Like, you know, how do we bring some perspective to this? Because yeah, I think everybody's going through this struggle and this problem, and yeah, it's the hysteria that is creating the issue. It's not the issue itself. We still have a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I think there's sorry, Simon, I was going to say I heard on the radio here yesterday that it's something like there's a year, or the food chain would need to be stopped for like a certain period of time for it to be actually running out in the supermarkets. And they said it was something like a year, which obviously doesn't apply to livestock and all that sort of stuff. But so I'm not sure exactly what they were talking about. But I think information on actually what sort of availability there is out there, and what and being really clear on the stages of lockdown, because I mean, we know here they've shut down restaurants, they've shut down all these different things. So but knowing that, okay, no matter what, this will be available, or this is what would happen if you were totally isolated in your home. You would still be able to shop, or you know, information about it would really help, because I haven't seen a lot from governments really telling what will happen.
That's starting over here, Griggsy. Not so much the messages about supermarkets or shopping, but just coming back from the skate park. Then it was the first message I'd heard from this multi-million-dollar government campaign, I think, to get some information out to people. Hopefully it's going to include some messages like that you know, supermarkets aren't going to close down if there is a shutdown, because I think people over here are hearing things like you know, like in Belgium where you are, or in Italy or France, you know, there's shutdowns, and I think people are thinking that everything's going to be shut down and we're going to be inside our houses and can't even go to the supermarket or can't get groceries delivered or anything like that. But I don't think anyone's proposing anything quite as extreme.
Yeah, there's definitely a bit of a misinformation, isn't there? And people like in that space of not knowing, there's a lot of fear. So
yeah, well, when there's no information coming through, people, I think, naturally fill the gap themselves, and their minds make up all sorts of stories to link with information.
Because even at, you know, the heart of the epicenter of the pandemic, right, where, you know, there was very severe lockdowns in places like China, there was people with the same story who went out, did some extra shopping, had to, you know, maybe tighten their belts for like a week or two, but they never ran out of food. Like, you know, 1 or 2 weeks later, the food and the shelves were restocked, because it's not a problem of that magnitude. But there are, I guess what the thing is, people is freaking out is there are certain items that will disappear for a period of time. Like, you know, we're already feeling that with like masks and certain medications. You know, these kinds of things that are required by, you know, people fighting the virus are definitely going to be in short supply for a while to come. But even then, it's like, you know, we have to be smart about that. If you don't really need it, if you aren't sick, you do not need a face mask. Yeah, if you are hoarding face masks, then you're being a dick. That's the short version of it. So it's kind of like understanding that. Maybe stock a little bit extra, but you don't need to save too much.
Yeah, just something I was talking about yesterday after our conversation, Kesh. I think I texted on the group chat about the situation that we've got here at home.
Yeah.
So I don't think I touched yesterday exactly where we are. So I'm in just south of Antwerp in Belgium. So I think I said I was in Belgium, but so the cases here I think are up at around 700. There's been a number of deaths, and yeah, it's because of the way Europe is. It's a bit of a melting pot with the open borders of travel and that sort of thing, and so I think it's been called the epicenter of the virus at the moment. So, but from a personal perspective, we're living while we're here in Belgium. So I'm on long service leave for 6 months from my work, and we're living with my father-in-law and his wife. And so there's 6 of us in the house across 3 generations. And the reason I mention this is they've just come back from Switzerland, and my father-in-law is sick. So it's been an interesting time the last 24, 36 hours, because we've been going through the process of working out, is it coronavirus? Is it not? And it's interesting because it totally changes the dynamic of your household, because he's been pretty much self-isolating up in the room, he's in his room, and it's only a 3-bedroom house, so it's not a massive space that we've got here. Hence why I'm speaking here. My kids are playing just there. You might hear their voices in the background, but yeah, it's a really interesting scenario for us, because I've got a little insight now into how it's being dealt with over here, in terms of getting tested and working out what the steps are. So he's called.
Tell us about that, man. What's the steps? What have you been going through?
Yeah, so when he was in Switzerland, he was sick, and so I was thinking that maybe he wouldn't be able to come back in to the country, but no problem. I don't know what the border situation is, in terms of, I don't think, right, or at least when they came back through, there wasn't any temperature checks or anything like that, or quarantine. So that's still, some countries are shut off borders, but not as a European wide rule.
But it makes sense where you can, right? Like if you have strong borders that you can kind of enforce, like that can make sense, but it's actually really expensive and not very effective, because coronavirus can, like, there's a week of kind of mild symptoms, and then after that, like 2 weeks of really severe symptoms. So people can like have 24 hours, have the virus and not show anything. So actually, that thing about borders or controlling borders, it's not going to work that well.
Yeah. It's interesting, because just hearing that, I didn't know that was the case, because I think he's been sick about just over a week now, and but his temperature's gone. He had a temperature. He's been coughing a lot, and the lungs have become a bit of a problem. So I'm not sure the symptoms are there, but so we've been keeping a very careful distance. But he's called 3 times doctors, twice in Switzerland and then once in Belgium. Took hours to get through yesterday, and they've put him on a waiting list. And I think the doctors are coming out to the house at some point. I'm not sure exactly when that is, but each time they've told him, no, you don't have coronavirus. And I'm like, that's weird. Don't you test for it? Because in Australia, I've had 2 friends, one who actually stayed with us a week ago, who went to Spain just before that, and both of them were tested like properly, just because they had a bit of a sore throat, whereas he's showing far more symptoms than them, and not, there's just this, no, you don't have it. And I don't know whether that's a response of.
Where was your friends when they got tested? Because I think that's
in Australia. In Australia.
So that's the thing that we're dealing with more than anything with COVID. It's not necessarily that we don't have know-how, it's that we don't have the infrastructure or the resources, right? So, you know, in Australia where we can test people, we've got the resources for that. It's not a problem. We get to stay ahead of the curve. But in places where it's more densely populated and perhaps doesn't have the same level of healthcare, or perhaps doesn't have, or is requiring more healthcare than the network can sustain, then they kind of have to go off heuristic. You know? Well, it doesn't sound like coronavirus, so we're not going to waste the test on that.
How were they assessing that? Was it over the phone, Griggsy, I assume? And
over the phone, and I guess just asking questions. I found it very interesting because I went through half of the World Health Organization course just on that they've put out on the coronavirus, and it seemed like all the symptoms were there. So we're just sort of hanging in that unknown space at the moment because my wife doesn't want to go to work with that hanging over her head, and also my son's still, like, the childcares are still open, so we don't really want to send him along if he's potentially contagious. So we're just sort of hanging in that space, and to be honest, we're clear, we've been given the clear, but I don't feel like that's really it's just it seems like don't panic, like, and if it gets worse, you'll call us back. So
was that there? Did they give you instructions for him? Like, did they say you should self-isolate anyway and call us back in a week or something? Or
hard to know because the conversation was in Flemish, and that's so I was asking a couple of questions after, but I didn't pick that up. So that's part of one of the things I've been really happy with throughout this is that I do speak, or I can now read French, which helps a lot because 99% of the news articles about Belgium are in the native languages of Flemish or French. So it takes time for those to then be, and not all of them will be translated, but some of them will come out in English, but after the fact. So it's been a nice little language builder as well. So that's where we're at the moment. We're working it all out with one house and the potential of having us all home. There's nothing like spending a couple of weeks all locked in with in-laws and kids all in the mix, is there?
No, well, a lot of people say 3 days is the maximum you can have with family, but are you really going to push that, Griggsy?
It's going to be very interesting.
I feel like the board game market is about to have a boom. If anyone wants to get ahead of that curve.
Well, I just went and bought a couple of things for my kids. Like I bought a little toy drone that we can play out in the backyard, but which my 3-year-old will have no idea how to control, but I'll show her. And we bought a little remote control car for inside, which will be a bit of an opportunity for her to have a go at something we normally wouldn't really do. And a couple of little like activities like beanbag throw thing that I bought, and so we're trying to stock up the house with activities.
I feel like this is an awesome thing to call out for people. Like, if there's anything that you know that could entertain people while they are at home, either sick or with their kids or for whatever reason in lockdown, I know so many people. There's great Kickstarter games where you can like download them for free and just like cut them out and play them. But other people have probably things that they do, really interesting things that not only can keep us occupied, but also build relationships. Like you're saying, that time, although scary, being in that phase of I don't know, no one's really giving me a straight answer, is also an opportunity to spend time with family and build those relationships.
And I feel like you got to be careful with the Yeah, I think you got to be careful with the screen time, because the natural thing for me is to go, oh well, you know, if I didn't have family around and kids to sort of be looking after, I'd be probably doing like an online course or. But I feel like you can really just burn hours and not really move off the couch. So I think it's pretty important to get out and do some other stuff as well. And that probably is a good little segue into what I was reading this morning, which was the WHO have released a little article on mental health during the outbreak. So there was a couple of little things that I picked up from their article, and one was checking news once or twice a day, not constantly checking, which is something I've been doing. So I'm gonna try and do a morning check and an afternoon check, or an evening check, because what can happen is
Can I just say, I think that'd be really cool if, you know, one or two of us are doing that and then bringing that back here, because I think the key part there is separating rumor from fact, and I think that's what people struggle with. Like, not everybody has a biology background or you know, understands epidemiology, so having that forum to kind of pick apart and go, well, what out of this is bullshit, and what if it is actually helpful? I think that could be really helpful, man.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that helpful thing, Kesh, is the key one for me, because there's probably a lot of there's no doubt a lot of bullshit out there, but there's probably also a lot of information that's accurate, but just taking up bandwidth, you know, like, is it adding anything to people's situation? Is it helping them at all? Or is it just sort of occupying that hunger for sort of answers or more information, where if you just break it down and keep it at the sort of the key information, then that'll give you the capacity to sort of manage the other parts of your life as well without getting all subsumed by what's going on.
Yeah. I come back to that TED talk by Alana Sheikh that just got released. It's called "Coronavirus is Our Future," and, you know, I think more than keeping abreast of the news from day to day, like, what the average person actually needs to know is quite minimal, and she captures it really well. Yeah, there's very little that's going to go off on a big scale that's actually going to change you day to day, because the thing that's going to help you through this is the small habits: washing your hands, keeping your distance, and the rest of it is just taking care of your mental well-being as you go through something that's different, you know.
There's a law of diminishing returns, I think, with this, with any information, but particularly with this stuff. Like, you know, once you're sort of past that peak of useful information, everything you consume after that has a lower sort of relevance or impact. Knowing where that line is, I think, is obviously the sort of critical thing. But yeah, if there's some way of helping with that,
I think.
Yeah, totally.
You want to say something, Justin?
Yeah, I was going to say there was a little expose or feedback, talkback sort of thing on the TV the other night, and it was very much what you were just talking about, Simon. Like the first 10 minutes, you know, the Minister for Education got on and spoke about what they were doing, and then there was a parent that came in and started, you know, slinging dirt at you know, the response from her school and all this sort of stuff. And I just, after half an hour, it was just running in the background. I just, even though I wasn't really watching it, I turned it off, because exactly what you just said, just reached that point of, okay, there's knowing stuff, and then there's knowing every single little thing. And sometimes ignorance is bliss. Like, that's one of my favorite lines from The Matrix. Ignorance is bliss. And to a point.
That's the thing that I want to dig into, because that's what I was thinking about as well, right? And I'm actually going to compare it. You know, in Australia, we've actually had two crises back to back in a way. You know, we just came out of those crazy bushfires, which affected a lot of us, and now we're face to face with coronavirus with the rest of the world. But even though they're both sort of complex issues, in terms of individual response and what's useful, information-wise, they're very different. right? So, for example, when the fires was going on, my partner's dad, he was living where he was living. He was up in the mountains, and there was 2 fires around him, and he was kind of like every single day on his iPad, just kind of checking if he needed to evacuate. Like, so keeping that up to date information was critical for that particular crisis. With the coronavirus, right? Even if you had complete up to date information, your individual circumstances of what you have to do every day does not change. Like, unless somebody puts you in lockdown, which in Australia is going to be very unlikely. Perhaps knowing if there's an outbreak in your area might help, but at the end of the day, you still just have to build good habits and recognize if you have the symptoms. Those are the 2 things you really need to do. So having that up-to-date information is actually going to affect your mental well-being, because you're just getting a bunch of information you don't need, and on the back of that, it's negative, and it's just going to make you feel crap.
So maybe maybe the questions are, out of all the available information, there's what information's relevant, to me in my situation. But then even more important than that is, I think, what information is useful. Like what you were just saying, Kesh. What of all this stuff can actually make a difference to me and my situation, and I really could benefit out of taking on board? Well, what's all the other nice to know stuff?
I think at the end of this, we'll put the links for that article that Justin brought up and that TED talk that I brought up, because I think it's a great beginning. And as this keeps, if this grows and we get more people coming in with their helpful stuff, maybe we can build a little bit of a toolkit to help curate that information.
Yeah, I think that what you were talking about, Kesh, with the habits is very in line with what they were talking about in the second part of the article that I mentioned. So what the first part was talking about whether or not overindulging in information, and the second was talking about maintaining routines. So yes, okay, the hand washing and that sort of thing is one particular type of routine, but for mental health, it was maintaining your daily routines. So trying to still have social connections, which is, we know, I mean, that was one of the biggest learnings from the course, the MAP course that we did together. For me, was relationships are absolutely central to well-being, if not the most important, then very, very close to. So maintaining connection, even if that's via online chat. So even if you're in isolation, you're not mentally isolated. You may be physically isolated, but you're still getting that contact. And also the importance of I guess maintaining a regular schedule. So if you normally wake up and have a shower, wake up and have a shower. Don't, like things like that. And going for exercise as much as you can. You might need to chuck on the TV, and we're going to be putting on a yoga episode after finding one on YouTube and doing a little workout in the living room afterwards, or going for a run, or things that you can do when gyms and that sort of thing might be shut down, because our gyms just shut down here. So unfortunately the Griggs Meathead experiment has come to a temporary halt. But yeah, those sort of habits, keeping real with what your normal routine is. Don't shy too far away and stay up until 4 a.m, because you'll just
not going to be helpful.
It's not gonna help you. And when we go back to normality, you'll be like all over the place. So and it will happen. We'll go back to normality.
Some sort of normality, a new normal maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Griggsy, interesting that you mentioned gyms shutting. So I'm a member at a local gym here, going in the morning, hopefully. I haven't heard anything about, so we're not in any state of shutdown, obviously, like where you are, but I thought I saw something mentioned today, one of the things I was looking at, that gyms should be okay. I assume unless you're going to a huge, I don't know, I've never been to a gym with 500 people or something, but so that was sort of a bit reassuring for me, because I was wondering about whether gyms would shut down in the event that we have a shutdown. But can you just explain what the shutdown means in Belgium? Like you said before, restaurants are shutting down, but does it include supermarkets? Does it include, I don't know, shoe shops or chemists or, yeah.
Yeah, good question, because we're still working out exactly what's happening there. I know that restaurants have completely shut, although a lot of them have been smart enough to start up their takeaway businesses if they didn't already do that. So there's quite a bit of, I've seen quite a lot of bikes, delivery bikes going by. So schools are shut. Although interestingly, they still have, they got something here called the garderie, which is like I guess it's like a childcare sort of thing. So they're still keeping that open. So I think that's for people who are in extreme circumstances where they can't, they can't stop their work, or there's only grandparents to look after the kids and they don't want that to happen. So like my son, like I said, my son's childcare is still open, but my daughter's school's shut. So normally tomorrow I'll be with my daughter at home and my wife and son will go off to work and childcare. But we like a bit of a different situation with obviously my father-in-law. So still working that out. But yeah, the gym shut on Friday, so 2 days ago. And we got told it's until the 3rd of April. So that's the first step. It's hard to imagine that once they've given out that date, it's hard to imagine that it'll be any earlier than that. But I would suggest that it will be potentially later than that if nothing changes or improves. The shops, from what I know, the normal everyday shops, I think, is shutting on the weekends and then staying open during the week. Don't ask me why. That's the information that I got from 2 or 3 shops. And supermarkets, I think, are still open normal hours, but normal hours here are like almost lockdown hours probably in Australia, because most shops are only open 8 in the morning till 6 to 8 at night. So it's not like your normal 7 till 12 Woolworths that we've got in our local area. And shut on all day Sundays. All day Sunday, no shopping. So it's very hard here.
What do you do if you need a bag of apples at 11:30 at night, Griggsy?
Oh, well, you survive. But I don't know about you. I love doing late night shopping when there's not many people in the store, and also just having that option to do it outside of work hours as well. Because you think if you go to work at 8 in the morning and work till 6 at night, then you basically, you might need to run there on your way home from work, or you've got a very limited window. Whereas in Australia, we're very lucky that we can do our shopping, 7 days a week. Especially the Sunday. The Sunday, I find, really makes it hard with kids, because you've got to get out on a Saturday in a pretty limited window. Some shops only open from 8 till 1 on a Saturday morning. So you got a limited window, and there's a lot of people in the stores. So, so yeah.
That's an interesting point. There could be an argument to extend opening hours to spread people across a bigger period, rather than forcing them all to go sort of at the same time and interacting with each other. But there's been no talk of that.
No, I think unions here, from what I know, are extremely strong. So that's the rationale for the opening hours. And I just noticed, like on a large scale, when I first came to Belgium, it's a massive change in the availability of stores. Stores don't stay open like in Australia because I think the unions, and I'm just not sure whether economically it's viable to do that here. So because in Australia, most restaurants would be open almost every day for lunch and dinner, or like it would be rare that they would be shut. Whereas here, it might be like they do a Wednesday dinner, or they do a Friday lunch, and maybe they do a Saturday dinner. Like some places would be like that, and it's so that's without even the lockdown. So yeah, it's going to be interesting on Monday to go out and have a bit of a. We're going to go out and have a little look around. I'm hoping to buy a couple more little games from a sports store for my daughter. So we'll see what's open. But yeah, we're pretty much prepared for staying at home. So
yeah. Raises another interesting sort of angle on it is the cultural differences, isn't it? Between, like, it might be harder for Australians to adjust to any shutdowns of restaurants because we're so used to be able to just decide 5 minutes before we want to eat that we're going to walk down to the restaurant and any night of the week it's going to be open. Whereas in Belgium, they're a bit more used to the restricted hours already, so it may have less of an impact in some ways.
Yeah, let's see. It's funny because I guess another story there on the restaurants was the Friday before it shut. So it was shutting Friday night, end of Friday night, going into Saturday morning. So they had all these videos up or on TV of people out at the pub or out at the restaurant. And everyone was doing this like almost like a New Year's Eve sort of festival thing. And it's like, my God, do you not get that the whole idea is that they're shutting to reduce social contact, and you guys are going out like a final splurge.
Yeah.
So I fully expect in 2 weeks there'll be like a massive peak on the contamination.
It's really funny you mention that because like there are so many instances where we as humans are really stupid like that. Like someone tells us, we shouldn't do X, Y, and Z. But we don't really understand it, so then we go and make a mess of it. Do exactly the opposite thing. So, the shopping thing is the exact same sort of thing. People told us to stock up a little bit, and we took that to the far extreme. And now it's leading to us having way more contact with each other. Like I said, when I went to Aldi, there was like 50 to 60 people all waiting outside, which was a counter point to what we should have been doing. It's this weird interdependency that just goes across everything.
Quick question for you guys. Have you seen anyone wearing gloves going out in public over there?
No, not yet.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen quite a few people with plastic, not your run-of-the-mill gloves, plastic gloves. Even in shops, people the what do you call them? The admin, the cashiers, and not accepting cash either, so accepting card-only payments, so they avoid the contact with the cash. But yeah, we don't have any masks, so
all of that is great, right? Cool idea, bro. But honestly, it comes down to whether or not you touch, your eyes, your nose, your mouth with your hands, right? Like if you're not doing that, you don't really need gloves. It's the equivalent, right? Like if you go home and you take your gloves off, it's the same as going home and washing hands. Like, it's a bit of a waste, really.
Yeah.
It's
it's
it might
interesting.
speak to that other bit. Like one of the theories on the hoarding of the toilet paper is that people, like, it doesn't make rational sense, and most people, if you stop them, if you stop them as they're getting the 50th roll of toilet paper off the shelf and actually talk to them, they would be able to talk their way through it and agree that they don't need to buy it, but they sort of almost can't stop, or there's something else at play. Maybe that sort of sense of control. It's like it's one thing they can control, buying toilet paper or putting on gloves, or I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. Very interesting. To watch people out in public with plastic gloves, and I think it's one of those things that if it makes people feel better, I'm not gonna stress about it. But yeah, it does. To me, it seemed a little over the top. If I was to do it, I would probably be the first person to be scratching my face with the gloves.
Yeah.
So
and that's what I think is the worrying point. If people think that buying toilet paper or putting on plastic gloves before they go outside is the type of stuff that's going to stop them from getting coronavirus, it could inhibit them to put in the work to create the habits that will actually inhibit it. If you think that the gloves are going to stop it, well, you're wrong. and now you're not doing the thing that will actually stop it. So.
Yeah, good point, Kesh.
I think that's a natural point to finish it up.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's wind it up for today, and and look forward to hopefully having a new voice, a guest, our first guest tomorrow. We'll see who that is. Not sure. Yeah. So looking forward to it, and thanks for joining us.
Promise and under-deliver, mate.
Oh yeah, well I'm sure we'll be able to find somebody who's interested in coming and having a chat.
You know what we need to do? We need to come up with some kind of clever sign-off. You know, something fancy that we can say at the end.
You stay healthy, world.
That's the wrong burgundy.
Oh, not at all. Not at all. I came up with that myself.
We obviously have not been thinking about that one all
night. No.
Maybe that's a question on notice for next time.
Yeah. Yep. Something professional.
All right. Well, it's been awesome chatting to both of you. I think that's what this was all about in the first place. It is way easier to talk through all the misinformation, all of the craziness, and all of the realness. Thanks for sharing your story today, Justin, about your granddad. I really hope that he's well, man. I really hope that it is a false alarm. But it's better doing this together, man. So
and it's my stepdad. He'd kill me if I didn't correct you on that. not granddad.
Lucky he's quite self-isolated and won't hear
it. I think he's still got internet access.
Go cut the cord.
All right,
that's it.
Awesome.
All right, thanks, guys.
Not the
Until then,
not any
be
other
well,
cord.
world.
See you guys.
All right.